Property Investing Insights, your authority on all things property investing, finance and wealth creation with Right Property Group.
Hello and welcome to Property Investing Insights, Client Stories. And this is the one without Phil. So obviously we have got a lot of more substance in this podcast. Of course, I jest. Today's guest is no stranger to property investing. In fact, he's been doing this for quite a while. And I invited him onto the podcast to share his story, how his journey unfolded from starting out as an accidental investor to becoming a multi-property portfolio owner, and now in the tail end looking to correct the foundational aspects of the portfolio to then look at scaling it from there. And along the way, he's also started a family. He's had career changes or career advancements. And so welcome, Andre.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. And so we'll jump straight into it, obviously. Let's talk about your background and where this journey actually started. Because this journey is, circa 20 years in the making.
Yeah.
So you were mentioning off camera that really your parents weren't in the investing scene and you were educating yourself, you were thinking of investing. So how did investing actually start for you?
Correct. Yeah, I had a keen interest in investing from a young age and doing something with your money to spread it further and not have the burdens of households that often households do and feel the pinch at times. And I thought to myself from a young age, for whatever reason, that I won't sort of have that happen to me. I want to try and strive for better and try and make it work better if I can. And maybe there's an avenue to do that. And I always thought property investing was the way to do it, and bricks and mortar was that way to get that advancement in life. And you're talking from a young age, from even like 15 years old. I did start my apprenticeship at about 15 years old before I started to drive even. So got into work early, left year 10, and not long after, a couple of years down the track, had a mother-in-law that was a real estate agent, and got talking to her about it. And she did some investing as well, and took me along to a few investing seminars and things like that. And I got immersed in books, and I couldn't read enough. I couldn't talk about it enough, all that usual stuff. And it was just super interesting to me. And everyone I talked to, you sort of either people weren't interested or they'd be a little bit interested or think it's a bit of a Ponzi, or, you're going to get your fingers burned, or no, property can't keep going up in value. Rents can't keep going up in value, all that sort of stuff. But I just saw different and I felt different.
Yep.
Mum and dad weren't of that mindset either. They were pretty risk averse. But there was an opportunity that came up through my dad's cousin, who owned a real estate agency up in Port Macquarie, to buy a house and land that was being built.
Which year was this?
That was in about 2003.
Okay. Yep.
So yeah, not too far after the Olympics, and Sydney had a bit of a run. I think it was a bit of a flat period at the time, but this was a little to no money down, or a no money down deal for me. All I had to do was sign some bank papers, and away I went. I was in the property market. And mum and dad felt some comfort around me being together with them on the journey.
Yeah, because they had someone to blame.
Exactly. Yeah. That was always going to be the case. That's how dads operate. Right?
Yeah.
So, and mine was no different. It still is. But yeah, but it was great, and it worked well. We put little money per week towards it because there's a bit of shortfall there.
Yeah.
But it was great for some tax offset and to just whet the appetite and wet the feet in the property market.
Yep. And you mentioned a no money down deal. So how did that eventuate? Now, as soon as you say no money down deal, most people actually think, okay, you actually didn't put any money down. But I suppose we need to put color on it in the sense that, okay, how did that? There's no money out of your pocket, but where did the deposits and all that come from?
Correct. Yeah. So that money was extracted from equity from our family home, which was the roof over my head as well, which in my best interest was to keep there.
Yes.
But obviously we made our own assessments. The bank made their assessment. It was about a $1,000 deal at the time, and the full deposit and loan came from the home equity. So it was a win-win story
Yep.
for us.
Yep.
at the time.
And so it was just you on title, or was it all three of you on
It was
title?
all three of us.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So mum and dad and you on title.
correct.
How was the split on that? Was it one third, one third, one third, or there was no?
I was 50.
Okay.
Yeah, and they were 20,
Yeah.
25 each. So yeah,
Yep. Okay. Because you were the servicing person in there, so you had the higher paying job.
correct.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. Or it was just the way that they wanted to balance it. So
Mhm.
obviously, mum and dad as one unit,
Yes.
and then me as another
Okay.
unit. So
Yeah.
that's how that operated.
Yeah. So let's talk a bit more about the talk about money at home. How was that, and how did it lead up to, okay, let's pull the trigger on this? Obviously, the job security was there. What was the general conversation around the dinner table for about money?
Growing up was tricky. I'm one of three boys. I'm the middle child.
Hmm.
Two
So you were the most dependable one then.
Yeah,
The middle child.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I was the one moving and
Yep.
shaking, causing the headaches. But two probably middle to lower income parents, and,
Mhm.
and both working at the time.
Mhm.
Lucky enough to have some care from grandparents that live nearby and things like that. But there was always those sort of money struggles, ebbs and flows here and there with that. With obviously the way the house operated, three growing boys into men, eating them out of house and home, and
Mm.
not paying board,
Yeah.
paying board, things like that. So yeah, it was there were some tough conversations overheard and things like that
Yep.
at times,
Mhm.
and that sort of triggered something in me to think that was not something that I wanted to have a future in,
Mm.
if the way I wanted to operate. And I thought, I've got to learn this. I've got to learn more about different ways of doing
Yeah.
things, because you can't help the situation you're in, but you could probably adjust
Mhm.
for a better
Mhm.
future.
Yeah.
And what are those adjustments? Hence, just immersing yourself and learning more, whether you take action and you feel like that's for you or not. But
Mm.
I kind of knew that property, I'm in the building game, but property was that path for me,
Mm.
and I understood it pretty well.
Yep.
Other than shares and some other things to invest in, property was quite a simple thing for me to understand and
Mhm.
break down. And I think some of the books I read broke that down really well,
Yep.
and helped me with that.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think it just making sure that that future was bright, and there were avenues to kind of grow a wealth base,
Mhm.
while I'm working, while I finish my apprenticeship, and I'm working hard and concentrating on that,
Mm.
but enjoying life as well. I've
Yep.
always been about that too. So I've traveled to numerous countries around the world. I've never let that stop.
Mhm.
And so yeah, just keep building that foundation, and progress from
Mm,
there.
mm. Yeah. So you've touched on quite a few important points, which really resonates with me. One is that you did not sacrifice lifestyle for investing, right? So you still continued traveling as
Yeah.
well, where you could, and then also you got into the first property more so because there was a catalyst there. The catalyst being that your relative ran a real estate agency,
Mm.
and they gave you a opportunity where it was thrust upon you, and now you because you are in the zone, you started the journey, right? So how long did you hold on to that property?
We held that from about '03 to 2013-ish,
Mhm.
so yeah, about 10
10
years.
years. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hadn't seen too much of an appreciation in growth,
Mhm.
but, yeah, I think we ended up selling it for about 411 at
Mhm.
the time. Um, but yeah, it did what it needed to do for us, and again, going back to my comment about it whetting the appetite,
Mm.
getting us in the market.
Yes.
For me, it was a no-brainer to
Yep.
do.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think it fed its purpose
Mhm.
for me and for us as
Yep.
a family
Yep.
as
And
well.
and how long after the first purchase did you then jump back into the market again, and where were we?
Yeah, so it was, coming out or during the GFC,
Mhm.
looking at Western Sydney,
Yep.
2008, so I
Mhm.
was already
Mhm.
getting back into it
Mm.
prior to selling, that Port Macquarie property.
Yep.
So '08, '09, I think I purchased 2, over those couple of
Mhm.
years. Um, might have been two or three between 08 and 2010.
Yep.
So one in Western Sydney, sub 200K at the
This is a
time.
house?
It was a house on land,
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
which is pretty unheard of, even at the time, for something sub 200K. But at the time too, you know, I was hearing chatter of those seminars and things like that. A lot of people were buying in Western Sydney, and, you know, people were buying at 90K or 80K, 60K.
I remember those days. They were heady days.
That's right, yeah. And so to buy at sort of sub 200, it's like, well, you know, this is still a lot of money, but it's you know, 190 whatever K.
Yeah.
But still, it had come a long way, but still cheap in today's prices
course.
as well. But knowing, with that mindset, knowing where property's going and what those properties were doing, and the whole Western Sydney growth story at the time was that, you know, Western Sydney was growing at probably the fastest pace of any area in the country, let alone Sydney. So, you know, it made a lot of sense to do that. And buying those three in fairly quick succession, sort of, it meant that I could set that base up, and then it was sort of steady as it goes from there.
Yeah. So you've come from a brand new investment. So how's a land package? So it was already built when you bought it. Yep. To then a much older type of property. How did you handle that transition, and how did you handle the parents in the background talking to you?
Yeah, good point. You're reminding me of that. Yeah. My dad was always sort of negative on it. He's like, you know, those sort of Blacktowns, Mt Druitts.
Because it had a stigma. They had a
Penrith.
bad stigma, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And it was, you know, the old, I wouldn't even let my dog stay there and all that sort of stuff. But they're great areas. I did many drives around there, and, you know, we grew up not far from there anyway. So I was very familiar with it. And you know, and even Mt Druitt, there's some nice homes around there, and they're quite expensive these days. And even back then, Mt Druitt itself has probably got that name in our social circles, but it's probably one of the higher prices of those areas. But, you know, again, going back to the fundamentals, it was just like I knew the fundamentals because I learnt and I immersed and I discussed it and I went over it and over it again. So I kind of knew it. Even though, the house is older, I've just gone up to Port Macquarie, looked at this brand new home. Everything's, you know, new. You got this shiny depreciation schedule as well. And then going down there, and, you know, it's an old red brick home. It's been pretty tattered. There's some commission nearby. You do second guess. You absolutely do.
Yeah. Because then everyone is in your ear saying, "Oh, no, that's a really bad area," right?
Yeah.
So you do absolutely second guess yourself.
Yeah. So you got to really hold on to that conviction. And again, like, I had that conviction through those seminars and the circles you're in and the people you surround yourself in. I think once you start going down that path, is making sure it's very important that you're surrounding yourself with those sorts of people and those smart people. And I mean, you know, these days with technology and everything we've got at our fingertips, it's probably even easier to do so and sort of run over the numbers and all those sorts of things. But it did feel like a backward step, but the fundamentals were there, the history of the price growth, you know, the whole Western Sydney narrative at the time. So it sort of sailed through that reasonably well.
So I want to remind the listeners and give perspective in terms of which type of area we're talking about. So if we're talking about Mt Druitt, and if we went to Melbourne, and think 10 years before today, if we went to Melbourne, we're talking Deer Park. If we're going to Brisbane, we're talking Woodridge. If we're going to, say, in Adelaide, we're talking Salisbury or Elizabeth. In 10 years ago, not today. And if we're in Perth, we're talking Gosnells of 10 years ago. So these areas, as you know, does have and did have stigma, but they've changed over the years. And that's what Mt Druitt and Blacktown did for you, is it absolutely went through a trajectory of less housing commission, more owner-occupiers, more investors in that area. And you rode that transition up in those areas, right? But you had relatively older homes in comparison to what you bought in Port Macquarie. And that then brought a new set of problems or opportunities, depending on how you look at it. And did you then have to lean on your skills to do the upkeep on these properties, or was it more of a set and forget approach?
A little bit of both.
Mm.
I tried to just being a bit more skilled with my hands. I did try and get out to the property whenever I could to do
Mm-hmm.
bits and pieces of maintenance,
Yep.
especially small tasks, because you'd still get call out fees and things like that
Yeah.
to do small things, whether it's as simple as a door stop
Yeah.
or a coat hook or something in a bathroom or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So they're simple things that most people can do, and it sort of saves that fee. And those fees add up if you've got 2 or 3 properties.
Yeah.
I mean, most people probably do it in their own home. So,
Mm.
I mean, if the property is local, why not stop by
Yep.
and you can do it? Pretty simple tools to use. So I did do renovations on each of them. Was generally um, pull the carpet out,
Mm-hmm.
do a floor sand, bring that back up, a
Yeah.
full repaint inside, and then a few fixtures and fittings, and making sure you're resealing the bathrooms
Yep.
is super important too, because leaks can go undetected and they can
Mhm.
cause a lot of damage. And same with the kitchen, maybe new splashback, just some
Yep.
of that sort of cosmetic tidy up.
Yeah.
So I did do a lot of that.
So it is a lot of maintenance on these properties, so planned maintenance, so that it's more of a preventative maintenance than knee-jerk reaction maintenance. When the agent calls you up and says, "Hey, bathroom's leaking," you've already preempted that by
Yeah.
resealing the bathrooms.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah, because, one of my properties at the moment's coming up needs a proper bathroom renovation. It's not going to be patchwork anymore, and it
Yep.
comes to that point.
Mhm.
But that means a whole heap of things, like, potentially moving the tenant out or trying to work through that is much more complex than, doing some silicon work, which is super easy, but
Yep.
could save you an absolute lifetime of headache.
Absolutely. So how long have you owned this particular property to now have to do the bathroom?
Yeah. So, and mind you, it would be the original bathroom. So I
Mm.
bought this one in '08, and now we're at 2026.
Yeah.
So
So you've got
it's a
circa 20 years out of it, right?
correct.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Mhm.
And on that same topic, the cooktop oven combo at one of the other properties, I re-welded up the grill for the top of it because it was missing that, and I got an extra 12, 13 years out of that,
Yeah. Yeah.
rather than buy a whole new one,
Yes.
which, they're cheapish, but
Mm.
if you can get more out of it,
Of course.
um,
Yeah.
and that worked. I was a bit dubious at the time, but,
Mhm.
I sprayed it up with heat-resistant black paint. It
Mhm.
didn't look any different to the other ones,
Yeah.
and it served its purpose.
Yeah. So using your skill set to then do the maintenance it has paid dividends for you.
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
But again, like, I think the moral of that story is they're pretty simple things, and I don't think it needs a tradesman to be able to work through it,
Mhm.
whether with their mind or their hands. I think everyday investors can generally get through a lot of that stuff if
Yeah.
they want to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, I've got very different skill sets to you. Like, I can't paint, I can't weld, I can't do anything, right? But I can buy properties.
Yeah.
So it comes back to using your skill set the best way possible to build up the portfolio, right? So, did you start with a goal in mind when you put this portfolio together, or has that formed over a period of time?
Yeah, originally it was, being 15 years old, or 17 years old, I think,
Mhm.
when we bought the first one. 15 when I started thinking of investing, was just to get rich.
Yep.
So to get
But there
rich.
was no definition of rich, right?
Not really. No, there was no perfect picture of
Mm-hmm.
what rich looked like, and what does rich look like anyway.
Yeah.
At my age, it's your health and your family's
Yes.
well-being.
Mm.
But yeah, that was that at that time. It was just like, and being unencumbered, and having the freedom of choice.
Yep.
I
Yeah.
guess. If you've got income coming in that's working for you, regardless of what you're doing and the output you're having to do, the proof of your work, then, that's you'd be pretty happy with that. And that's where I think I evolved to,
Mhm.
was just having that passive income switched on,
Mhm.
and then that would give me the freedom of choice as to whether I wanted to try this or try
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
I could go and do pottery
Mhm.
3-4 days a
Yeah.
week.
I can almost see you doing that.
Yeah. Yeah, the movie Ghost inspired that one, but yeah, no, look, so that was my idea of it. But
Mm.
then as you get a bit more sophisticated, I've always been pretty ambitious to just growing the portfolio and seeing what you can do with it. There's a lot of creativity in it.
Yep.
You know, being a tradesman, you're creative. You like standing back and looking what you've built. There's creation in that too.
Yeah,
There's
absolutely.
creating that, but it's also providing something for others as
Mhm.
well. So it's providing homes and houses and good quality living spaces to people, but don't otherwise or aren't otherwise able to
Yep.
if it's to be their own. So they're having to rent at that point in time in their life,
Yep.
and you'll be able to provide that for them too. And I think there's satisfaction in that for me as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so, how many rentals do you control at the moment?
7,
7.
yeah,
Okay. Yep. And obviously, that's been accumulated over a period of circa 20 years.
yeah.
We are sitting in 2026. What does the journey look like from here onwards? We're pretty much on the eve of a budget hand down. Is probably going to be the biggest tax change since GST. So, what does the journey look like for you going forward?
Yeah, so just to regather, reset. I've got a young family now, so
Hmm.
the sort of landscape looks a bit different for me.
Mm-hmm.
Just making sure I'm insulated moving forward.
Yep.
We speak often about having enough buffer,
Mm.
making sure that is there and it's the right buffer as well.
Mm.
Whether that needs building up a bit more, and making sure that foundation is set for the future, not necessarily to go again, but just maybe a bit of consolidation. It's probably a good time
Mm.
of the market, especially being fairly Sydney
Mm-hmm.
heavy in the
Mm-hmm.
portfolio.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, just make sure the assets are protected, cash flows good, and
Mm-hmm.
we're getting enough out of the properties or making sure the cash flows where they can be and optimized.
Mm.
Again, any future renovations such as the bathroom and
Yeah.
things like that. So gathering a good full perspective and picture and recapturing what the portfolio looks like
Mm-hmm.
and what it could be moving forward.
Yep, yep. And so, having these 7 rentals, what's your holding cost in today's interest rate as an approximate figure?
Holding cost, so each property's interest rate's about 6.2-ish, give or take,
Mhm.
depending on what they are. Um, Holding costs are about 170K.
1,000?
Yeah.
Yep, yep, for 7
Um,
properties.
yeah,
Yep.
and that's including all the expenses and things like
Mhm,
that.
mhm.
Would have to relook at the numbers for the combined income,
Yep.
but obviously they're a bit different across the properties
Mhm,
themselves.
mhm.
So yeah, with the interest rates going up as well, might be a little bit more. And
Mm.
again, having to forecast,
Yeah,
maybe another couple rate rises this year,
yes.
maybe 3. Who knows?
Who knows?
We'll see. But yeah, just making sure there's enough forecast
Yeah,
there.
yeah. So 170K is your expense, right? So and when you take the income into account, what's the shortfall in the portfolio? Are we talking a couple of thousand per property? Are we talking tens of thousands per property?
No, yeah, it's a couple of thousand per
Mhm.
property.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So
Because I recall from our review which we've had recently, I
yep,
think it was sitting at the entire portfolio, including your PPOR, was sitting at around 41K negative
yep,
cash flow.
yep.
This is before tax, and obviously, hopefully yours will be grandfathered,
Yes.
and that and then you dial in the tax benefits in there. How are you positioned, seeing that most of your portfolio is New South Wales centric? We've got one in Victoria. How is your land tax situation in New South Wales?
The land tax situation isn't too bad.
Hmm.
And fortunately, like I like that they do that. You're able to pay it in chunks.
Yes.
So you can set up sort of like a 6-month
Hmm.
monthly payment. So it's not as big of a hit. But I think combined it's about 6K per year.
Yep.
So I mean that's a lot of money,
Hmm.
but in the scheme of things and how heavy New South Wales it is, it's not too bad.
Yep.
Um, and we do pay some for Victoria as well.
Hmm.
And I think just for that one property in Victoria that sort of weighted against New South Wales isn't too bad.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. So we recently had a review where we were looking at the property with the bathroom issue. We were looking at, okay, now you're in two minds, whether to just simply offload that, get us a bit more buffer as we get into family life.
Yeah.
And then we landed on, okay, how about we just go back and build all our granny flats and retain the properties and reset the cash flow once the granny flats are built, and then scale from there. We see what it looks like, whether we just leave it alone after that or scale into a, say, commercial property or more into development, because that's a part of your skill set.
Yeah.
To then look at getting to the income side of it, because now the family needs are getting to be forefront, as opposed to now you've already built the portfolio, you've got the foundation, you need to show up the foundational issues that it has in terms of cash flow by building the granny flats, right? So that's a little bit of a different mindset shift from when you initially came into the review with saying, let's sell down the property, and then I turned around and said, okay, maybe we need to look at perhaps Melbourne, sell down Melbourne if we absolutely had to.
Yeah.
But all of your properties, or most of your properties, have got development potential. You've already built a granny flat in your Penrith property. How did you find that process? If you take yourself away from being in the industry, how did you find yourself in that process of building the granny flat?
Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah.
It's a fun process to sort of see through, nutting out different granny flat builders,
Yep.
how they do it differently. Different ones do it
They're all
differently.
different, aren't they?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Mm.
Yeah, and they've got different ways of doing it. Use different materials.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, sort of navigating that was interesting. I think I landed in the right spot at the time. Maybe what I could look at again, if I was to do it again next time, which I likely will, is to package it up with the one.
Yes.
I think at the time I sort of split it out where I went to a drafty for a design and then took that to the granny flat builder rather than the
Which
granny
then
flat.
created his own problems, didn't it?
You're correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And but that's just the way I sort of did it because I knew the drafty and they actually had some really good ideas for the property themselves. But if you package it up with the granny flat builder, I mean, they've got, something for every different shape block
Yep.
and size, and the way they section the property off is they can do it pretty smart. And I think in this case we ended up with a really good result, but there was those clunky bits and pieces along the way. I think if you just went to that one expert that was well selected, you could have that smoother outcomes. I
Yeah,
think.
yeah. Then you're not having to project manage a few different people
Correct.
to get to the result, right?
Exactly.
You end up with the same result anyhow.
That's right.
Give or take a couple of thousand, depending on who you're using, cost efficiencies, and obviously the biggest thing is the time frame to build, because that has got a finite cost as well.
Yeah.
That not only in today's market, not only does materials go up and up and up every single month,
Yeah.
your build time gets blown out because of trades not being readily available.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, that's right. And these guys had a great trade pool. They knocked it out well, but in good time as well. Sent good progress photos. So you want to go right through them, making sure that you get some real life case studies, maybe even turn up to some of their builds, see if they're messy or a clean
Yes.
builder.
That's
matters
really
a lot.
important.
Yeah.
Especially if you've already got a tenant in the front house.
Yeah.
And you're building at the back. You want a trade that really is meticulous and neat and tidy, because you don't want to create trip hazards for your tenant either.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't want piles of rubbish in the driveway and things like that. But yeah, back to the experience as well. I've sort of found out along the way I had to do a flood study. That obviously added to the cost.
Yes.
Penrith City Council changed their rules around the flood zones at the time. So I think they shortened those 1 in 100 year floods down to a 1 in 20 or whatever it was at the time. So those overland flows and things looked a bit different. But again, it's picking the right expert for it. I spoke to someone the other day and I think they've got the wrong expert, and that's been going round and round in circles for about 6 months. And that expert is sort of saying, you know what, I can't do this anymore.
Yes.
We've already sunk a lot of money into it, and the council's about to say, hey, we're about to cancel your application. So it matters a lot which expert you go with. But thankfully too, this drafty had that hydraulic engineer
Yep.
as a contact. So that was fortunate
Mhm.
that worked.
Yeah,
well
it's all
as
about
well.
connections, isn't it?
Yeah, correct.
So you started the journey back in 2003. We've got circa 20 years behind us. Um, have you tracked how your mindset has shifted over the years, and what were the aha moments along the way?
Uh, Mindset. Yeah, look, I'm probably. Um, well, I don't think I was egotistical back then, but like, it's
Are
not.
you are now?
Not yeah, I pick up. No, but it's not about the sort of being rich.
Yeah.
That whole thing.
Mhm.
It's just a solid base for the family, and it's not necessarily something for me to switch on at some point
Yeah.
well before retirement and
Yeah.
retire, and then sit around thinking, what am I going to do
Yeah.
next? Still planning on working till I can't anymore,
Mhm.
and how that looks down the track, but I'll still be working to whatever capacity I can. So I think for the aha moments, it's I think every step you take, it becomes easier,
Yes.
and you zoom out more.
Mhm. Mhm.
That's that probably not epiphanies, but they're just things I think progressively your mind expands with it.
Yep.
At first, that Mount Druitt property was a big leap. It was my own property beyond that Port Macquarie one. It was
Yep.
my own name on it. It was, yeah,
And you couldn't afford to fail.
couldn't afford to fail.
Yeah.
But again, having the right conviction and mindset towards it,
Mhm.
and knowing those fundamentals. But yeah, it was a big leap at the time, but and a big transaction even at sub 200 back in '08.
Mhm.
But you get to a point where you could buy two or three in one go, and
Yeah.
it's not that big of a deal because
Mm.
you're sort of just looking at numbers.
That's right. And you didn't need that big a deposit to get into a property because we're talking 200, sub 300 properties here.
Yeah.
Um, Now, having said that, it was still a sort of an unachievable number back then because financing was hard, just as it is right now.
Absolutely.
Financing was hard. And also, the information, to get to the information was really hard as well at that time.
Yeah, it
Mm.
wasn't easy, and you were listening to a lot of people sort of sharing information because they'd
Mhm.
read it in books.
Yeah.
There was a bit out on the internet. There was some newsletters you could get a hold of.
We're talking dial-up days, aren't we?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Those noises, those funny
Yeah.
modems, mate. But and again, it's just talking to real estate
Mhm.
agents,
Mhm.
and there was a lot of pounding the pavement, and you don't
Yes.
hear as much of that anymore.
No.
But fortunately, we've got great tools like buyers agents and different people that we can listen to and hear different perspectives on,
Mm.
and the software and the tools we've got is just beyond anything
Yeah.
we had back
Yeah.
then. So, and you can do your own due diligence
Mhm.
fairly easily.
Mm.
And, AI is like after our
Yeah.
meeting last week, I
Mhm.
punched a bunch of stuff into
Mhm.
AI.
Mm.
And funnily enough, it agreed with you
There you go.
after
Good old chat.
I road tested, I road tested what my thinking was
Yes.
versus that. And,
Yeah.
and it was exactly how we ended up at the end of the conversation, I
Mhm.
think.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I still got a bit more testing to do on that.
Yeah.
I'll try and break it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, and that goes back to when you get a partner as well. Obviously, my
Mhm.
partner
Mhm.
come into my life when I'd already had a few properties as
Mhm.
well. So there's
Yep.
different mindsets at play
Yeah. Yeah.
there, and she's become a mother, and
Mhm. Mhm.
her mindset changed. I become a father, so your focus changes to the kids and to the family
Yeah.
home,
Mm.
and you want less worries where some tenants might be giving you
Mm.
hiccups and
Mhm.
things like that. But
Yeah.
luckily, I've got years built up before that
Mm.
time where I've road tested a lot of those issues and
Yep.
been through a lot of that,
Mhm.
so I can navigate that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I really resonate with that in the sense that you've gone through this changes in mindset in the journey, right? So you started this journey alone, then you had family, right? So Madeline came to the forefront, and then you had two minds. Now you had to convince her to
that's
invest,
right.
right? So
Yeah.
and then now you've got family, right? So the mindset's now shifted yet again because naturally mothers will come from a nesting point of view, and you now coming from a protecting point of view to say, okay, I now need to start playing a cash flow defensive game, rather than, okay, let's buy one more, and playing the equity game. Now you need to change to playing the cash flow game, right? And earlier on off camera, we were talking about, cash flow quadrant, and that's exactly the game you're playing, which is you've got the assets now. Now we need to correct the cash flow and then scale the cash flow rather than scale the equity side of things, because you've already got the equity behind you. Yeah. So this is now getting to the other end. Is what I find, and this is my journey, and this is the journey of a whole lot of my colleagues and clients, is that in the front end, you're targeting growth, you're targeting getting the equity behind you, so that if things go pear-shaped, you can offload something, you've got a wad of cash to smooth out the tough times. But then at some point in time, there's a tipping point. And the tipping point is then towards cash flow, where you actually starting to question whether I need to buy more. You're actually starting to question, do I need to keep all of these? You start questioning also, okay, where's this heading? What have I got to show for what I've really done?
Yeah.
Especially when you compare yourself with a neighbor who's having parties every second weekend, and you're still on a budget to hold on to your portfolio. Yeah. So you say, right now, you've got to find 40 odd K a year to hold on to all of your assets, and that'll increase as the interest rates go up. You've got down to one income now with family additions. You've got dependents that are going to grow and ask for expensive shoes,
Absolutely.
expensive schools. So we need to now change the portfolio to cater for that.
Correct. Exactly. So you can go on the family holidays and all those sorts of things, and live life the way it should be lived. And I've never lost focus on that as well, and making sure that you get those experiences in, and don't lose yourself too much in the journey. If you want to, you can, but that's how I saw it. And I think that's the same. You don't want those family struggles as well, because otherwise it's just adverse to what I was originally setting out to do. So and totally agree. It's sort of just switching over that, and it's not about accumulation anymore. And I think my cousin said to me, he goes, "You're not going to buy anymore, are you?" I think I made a comment once having a beer, and he said, "You can't just keep buying." And I thought, well, why not? But you can if your structure's right. But then I went away and thought about it a bit more, and I thought, you know what? You're probably right. You don't actually have to. You don't need to own 10 or 20 or 50 properties. It's not about the number of properties, it's about the quality. And what they're giving you in return, and what you've set out to do is are you achieving it? And sort of being grateful and content with that as well, and not going beyond your means too, but having that structure set up. Just because you can buy one more doesn't mean you necessarily have to.
What keeps you up at night?
The kid screaming, calling out. Our eldest calls my name a lot, which is great. I love that. But,
I relate with that. That's the same with me as well. So Reshmi does not like getting out of bed when she's in bed, so it's me jumping out, catering for that.
I think I don't know, as a father, but Maddie does as well. You sort of sleep with one eye open when you got the kids. The way our house is set up, they're at the other side of the house too, so you sort of like, as soon as you hear a peep, bang, your eyes are open. But I don't think, I've always been pretty settled as far as the portfolio goes. We're talking off camera about the frustrations around some of our government's decisions, whether it doesn't matter which government's in, but that could be a frustration. But I mean, again, in the long game, it again, going back to your comment about smoothing out, as long as you've got your portfolio geared in the right, heading in the right direction and geared right, you should be able to sort of sail through most of that, or navigate through most of that pretty well. But it's about getting in front of it as well, and not overstepping. So that's what it's about for me at the moment. But it's definitely the kids and the bladder, depending on the night.
I can relate with that. So in this journey, what would you have done differently?
Probably the structure.
Mhm.
And there was a period of time where I did set and forget,
Mhm.
and I just I left it as is. I thought, you know what, borrowing capacity is not there. Um, I'm focused on work or whatever I was doing at the time.
Mm.
Had a bit of travel in front of me, and I did sort of set and forget, but
Yep.
and I didn't sort of keep in touch with experts and
Mhm.
surrounding myself with and keeping up with books and podcasts. I sort of ebbed and flowed through a period where I went all in, and then I
Mhm.
pulled back and I went
Yep.
all in,
Mhm.
and things like that. So I think to keep consistency with portfolio
Mhm.
reviews with the right people,
Yep.
like what I'm doing with yourself
Mm.
now at periods, making sure you're keeping in touch with the broker and
Mm.
the accountant and all that sort of stuff.
Yep.
Whereas I think at the time, I mean, the way I purchased back then, it worked for me and it worked
Mhm.
for the market and the way the banks and lending was set up. But fast forward to now, if I could go back, I could probably change some of that and the
Yep.
way some things are structured, maybe.
Mhm.
But otherwise, it still serves that purpose. And like you said, now we'll sort of regroup, set that foundation, maybe in the future buying a commercial, looking
Mhm.
at development, things
Mhm.
like that. But we'll get this right first.
Yeah,
And
but the reality is you don't need to buy anymore, right? We could work with the current
correct.
portfolio
Yeah.
and get to a goal depending on how we set up that goal,
Yeah.
and that changes over time, right? When kids come, when life gets busier or less busier, that'll change.
Exactly.
So if I were to talk to an existing client that's already got a portfolio, what advice would you give them?
That's a tricky one, I guess. If it's someone in my shoes, again, I'd probably go back to that consistency. Don't lose sight of the target,
Mm-hmm.
and before that, even make sure there's a target there.
Yep. Yep.
Build that
Mm-hmm.
target.
You need an aiming point.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, although I was accumulating properties, I was still sort of flying blind for a little while there. I sort of had some experts
Mm-hmm.
at my fingertips, but I didn't have that target built
Yep.
and that foundation set. And it's like, this is what that 10-year view looks like
Mm-hmm.
your, to coin yours, is design your decade.
Yep.
I think that's really important. I think that would have been something that I should have done. And
Mm-hmm.
I would probably say to somebody else, as much as it sounds like it's a long period of time,
It
look
goes really quickly.
look at what that
Yeah.
10 years looks like.
Yep.
Family planning is important too.
Mm-hmm.
What does it look like going down to one income for 1, 2, 3 years?
Mm-hmm.
However your family's set up.
Yep.
Do you need to maybe sell a property? Do you need to maybe look at how you can optimize the existing properties,
Mm-hmm.
buy a granny flat or adding another room or however it looks? Yeah, so that's what I'd probably say. As simple as that. It's just don't try not to make it too complicated.
Yeah.
I've got caught in the weeds a bit at times and try to make things too complicated. I think you can listen to too many different
Podcasts.
points of view and podcasts and things like that. I think
Yeah.
you sort of need to be steady in that and take some things with a grain of salt.
Mm-hmm.
Keep your eyes wide open.
Yep. Yeah.
But I think you can sort of tune to and listen to the underlying messages through most of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So the idea is, don't take your eye off the prize. Yeah, that's really important. So that way you don't get sidetracked
Definitely.
with the portfolio. And for someone that's just starting out with the current changes coming through with taxation, what would you recommend in terms of based on your experience?
Yep.
Because you've seen some tax changes along the way
Yeah,
as well,
definitely.
right? So what would you
Some
recommend?
attempted changes too.
Yes. Yes.
I think just sort of see where you're at. Think about what your personality is, your
Mm-hmm.
investment personality,
Mm-hmm.
and what your temperament can stand up to,
Yep.
and sort of what you feel like you could navigate, because you will be thrown different scenarios along the way.
Mm-hmm.
But again, having that team of experts and keeping in touch with them at times, at least every 6 to 12 months. Um, you're always going to with your accountant anyway,
Mm.
but your mortgage broker and your property strategist,
Yep.
buyers agents and things
Mm-hmm.
like that. But then keeping across the market too and sharing ideas and you know reading books and things like that. But get a longer term view. Think about who you are. as a personality and what you think you are as an investor.
Yep.
And then sort of build a bit of a longer term view, 5 to 10 years, I think, and then sort of take it step by step. So Rome wasn't built in a day. You sort of take one step forward, and that one step can be a huge leap sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. Andre, we could continue talking about this forever.
Definitely.
It's a very easy conversation we're having, and that's testimony to your journey. What we've talked about today is the journey, how you need to be focused, how you need to be really working towards an end goal. But it doesn't have to be clear right from the beginning, right? You've got to get started to begin with, and don't let changes in legislation, changes in consumer sentiment derail you from what you're trying to achieve. So, Andre, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And really appreciate your time.
The information featured in this podcast is general in nature and does not take into consideration your financial situation or individual needs and should not be relied upon. Before making any investment, insurance, tax, property or financial planning decision, you should consult a licensed professional who can advise whether your decision is appropriate for you. Guests appearing on this podcast may have a commercial relationship with the companies mentioned.